And thank you to the Illinois Institute for Continuing Legal Education for inviting me back. I had a great time here a couple of years ago, and I'm very pleased to be here today. We've got a lot of material that we're going to get through today. And one of the basic warnings I want to give you is what I've always done, and I did with my last ICL program as well, is there's a lot more material than we could ever possibly get through today. And the intent was to give you some material to take back as reference materials. As an example, for the program that we're going to be doing second and then third as a two-parter, I think I have 155 slides. I mean, we could be here for 4 hours just for that program. And then the early afternoon program that we're going to do, which is called Better Using What You Already Have, I think has 190 slides. And so we're not going to necessarily get through all of those. We're going to focus today on what's really important to cover live. Now, I have one basic rule in all of my programs, and any of you who have seen my programs before know the rule is really simple. Here it is. Rule number one: there are no rules in my programs. I'm not here to hear myself talk. I'm here hopefully to give you some information that's immediately useful so you can take back to your practices even tonight after the program or tomorrow morning and immediately put to use. And so when you guys have questions, just go ahead and raise your hand and let's just talk about it. Don't worry about interrupting the flow unless I'm really on a roll. And I'll let you know if I am. But go ahead and ask. I mean, this is your program, not my program. Now, before we jump in, what I would like to do is just get a sense from all of you of your practice situations and maybe some of the technology that you're currently using. Let's first look at firm size. How many of you are true solo practitioners? You practice completely by yourselves. Multiple personalities don't count. Okay, all right, a bunch, all right. How many of you are solos with at least one assistant? Okay, a little variation on the theme. How about 2 to 5 lawyer practices? 6 to 10 lawyer practices? Okay, 11 to 25? Okay, anybody more than 25? Okay, we'll keep going. More than 50? And going once, going twice. Okay, everybody's under 50. Anybody in a corporate legal department? Anybody here for the dental continuing education, which is down the hall that way? Trust me, this is going to be a lot more interesting than teeth. You'd probably want to stay. Okay, how many of you have a laptop as your primary computer? It's your office wherever you go. You might dock it in the office, okay? How many of you have access to a shared laptop or use one part-time? Okay, anybody here own a netbook, one of the nifty new, really smaller machines? Okay. Any Mac users here? Okay, there's always at least one. In California, it would be 3/4 of you would be raising your hands and cheering and all of that kind of stuff. How many of you have an iPhone? iPhone users? Okay. BlackBerry users? Other devices that you're kind of confused about knowing what it actually has on it? Okay, like a Windows mobile device or something like that. Anybody have the new Palm Pre smartphone? Anybody? Okay. How many of you use, I guess let me reverse the question. Is there anybody here, and I hate to put it this way, it actually kind of makes me sad, but anybody here who still uses WordPerfect to some extent in your practice? Okay, all right, good, good. Those hands always immediately feel, yes, I still do. And how many of you are using Word 2003 in your offices? Okay, how many of you are using the newer Word 2007 in your offices? Okay, and are there any Vista victims here? Anybody using Vista? Okay, truly my sympathies to you. The good news is that in roughly 3 months, it pretty much goes away forever. A very, very good thing. Let's see, what else do I want to know? Oh, how about practice management products? Amicus Attorney, Time Matters, Practice Master, Pro Law, PC Law, etc. Okay. For those of you that didn't raise your hands just now, how many of you have been thinking about practice management systems and just haven't gotten around to it yet? Okay, it's actually a trick question. The rest of you are supposed to put up your hands because everybody needs practice management software. How about document management software? For those of you in bigger firms, you might be using like the program that used to be called iManage and then Interwoven Worksite, now Autonomy Worksite, or PC Docs or World Docs in a smaller practice. Again, can I see hands on document management? Okay, all right, so very few, all right. And how many of you have a Facebook page? How many of your children have Facebook pages? How many of you think your children have Facebook pages that you don't know about yet? Okay, the answer is all of them. How many of you have a Twitter account set up? How many of you actually pay any attention to your Twitter account? Okay, fewer of you. How many of you have ever sent out a tweet? Anybody? Okay, well I know you guys have, but I'm asking them. All right, and How many of you have a profile on LinkedIn.com? Okay. How many of you have ever looked for information about someone else, co-counsel, an expert, opposing counsel, or whoever, friends, relatives, countrymen, on LinkedIn.com? Anybody? Okay. All right. And how many of you have a Plaxo.com account? Anybody? Okay. It seems to be all the same people. How about a Names.com account? Anybody on that site? Okay. All right. All right. Well, I appreciate that information. And let me give you kind of a preview of what we're going to talk about today. Our lead program is the one that's lent its title to this entire day today. And we're focusing on social media. Those sites and services like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Plaxo and Names, and actually several others. You could probably group MySpace in there, which if you were all 11 and 12-year-olds, you would be fanatical users of. And we're going to also talk about a concept that I know all of you have heard about called viral marketing. And what does that really mean? Really, the focus is these are part of a series of programs that I developed several years ago that I called Tightwad Technology for Tough and Trying Times. With the idea being, even before the economy really tanked last fall, in an increasingly competitive marketplace for legal services where clients are more and more demanding and expect much more for less, or are pushing for doing anything other than hourly billing, because the great dirty secret of the legal world is clients since the dawn of time have hated hourly billing and sort of transferred that hatred to us as a group. But the pressure to be able to get the word out from a business development perspective, even an announcement perspective, from a public relations perspective, in the most effective, professional, but least expensive way possible. Now, how many of you have blogs for your practice? Is there anybody here who has a blog? Okay. How many of those of you didn't raise your hands have been sort of thinking about it and thinking maybe I need to do this? Okay. Is there anybody here who doesn't have a website for your practice and is willing to raise your hand and admit it in front of all of your colleagues here? That's very brave. I commend you for that. But we're going to talk about today not just these issues in terms of websites and blogs and leveraging social media from a business development perspective. We're going to look at it from another side and sort of the dark underbelly of social media. And that's looking at the potential ethical traps and pitfalls that the social media unwary lawyer can fall into. It's a very gray area, and an area that's just not being discussed, which I find very, very disturbing. If you've seen my programs in the past, you know that a lot of what I talk about is sort of the intersection point, well, I mean really more like the head-on train wreck collision point between the use of technology in practice and complying with our ethical requirements and the whole question of malpractice risk reduction. So we're going to look at these issues from a practical perspective and then also how to stay out of trouble by avoiding doing really stupid things. So that's what we're going to cover in our first segment. Then we're going to do a two-part version of a 60 tips program. It's actually probably going to be more like, depending on how many we get through, 120 tips. Everything from Windows issues to using Word, practice management system, tons and tons of legal, useful, free, and really cheap resources on the web that some of you might know about, but I bet many of you don't. Shortcuts and tips and tricks and what to buy and what not to buy. There's not much we're not going to cover in that two-part segment. Then what we're going to do is the second program in the afternoon is the one that has the 195 slides. And of course, we're not going to get through 195 slides unless I talk like the FedEx guy from the commercials in the 1980s, which some of you might remember, but I'm not going to do that. So we're going to look at how to better use things you already have. In these times, I make my living as a consultant. I mean, I guess I'm kind of a recovering lawyer. I went through a whole 12-step program and became a regular person again about now 25 years ago. Just to say, there's hope for all of you at some point. But what I actually do for a living isn't this. I mean, this is kind of my hobby. What I do is I consult with law practices all over the world, helping them figure out not only the right technology to use, but the smartest ways to integrate it into the flow of handling their matters. And one of the things that I've seen is that firms hire me expecting me to tell them to buy all sorts of new stuff. And often, that's not the case at all. What I find is so many practices that are barely scratching the surface of all of the technology that they've spent a ton of money on over and over again over the years, often expecting just the idea that, okay, if I buy a new version of something and just click install by osmosis, I'll become slightly more brilliant and more profitable and more productive. and thinking that these things happen by magic.